Let's talk about genre and what even is genre, and why does it matter, and how many times can I say the word genre until it starts to sound weird and lose its meaning. Let's take a look. First up, what defines a genre? Genre is a style or a category of art, music, or literature. Alright, I guess we're done here. That's all you need to know. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and share and not so fast. In a sense, filmic forms or genres are large patterns formed out of a set of stylistic devices. Over time, filmmakers worldwide have developed forms and patterns that have since become standards in how movies are made and thus ultimately perceived. These devices are the individual building blocks that shape the overall narrative. Traditionally, these conventions make up viewers' form of expectations based on experience. Prior experiences of the audience determine the relationship to the work and help them build an initial bond with the characters and events. In other words, based on these experiences and expectations, we know what to expect before we even enter the cinema. This is why genre films use these common traits, also known as tropes, used within other works of the same genre. Using these conventions, however, sometimes causes critics and audiences to see these stereotypical devices as cliches. Yet these cliches are merely based on previously established conventions or traditions. Nevertheless, these patterns and conventions tell viewers what to expect before going into the movie. Thus, when audiences experience an unfinished story, they know something is wrong and in return feel dissatisfaction. The entire film genre suggests these organizational laws and how the world inside the film is supposed to be created. Some works aim to challenge these expectations by breaking the patterns and forcing the audience to re-evaluate how they see the work and reconsider their views on their previous expectations. I am a big fan of the mystery and horror genre. Using one of its most popular forms, the slasher film, as an example, we expect to have a protagonist, usually a woman, being hunted or chased by a presumably male antagonist. As portrayed in the main villains of movies like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho or John Carpenter's Halloween, this leads us to expect there to be some kind of inherent sexual pervertedness embodied within the opponent. In 1979, however, Ridley Scott challenged these conventions with the sci-fi horror space slasher Alien. While still following the idea of having a primarily sexually motivated adversary, the antagonist now targets victims regardless of gender or sexuality. Unlike the previous examples, Alien is not just about women trying to not get killed or worse by a perverted male opponent. With Alien, Scott created an entirely new subsection of the genre by decontextualizing the setting and putting the slasher horror into a haunted house in outer space. Additionally, it raises the question, is the alien sexually motivated? This perception may be linked to the typical sexual motives through H.R. Giger's aesthetics. However, this is an implied connection more than it is an explicit motive. Truthfully, the alien hunts its prey for reproductive purposes, only here it doesn't matter whether or not these victims are female or male, as long as they are suitable hosts. There is something to be said about the fact that the fictional entity that breaks down the concept of the perverted male antagonist is a de facto alien. It's a sexual motive that eschews all human categories of sex and gender, rendering them either meaningless or at the very least totally irrelevant. So in summary, one could say that genre will always find a way to utilize these cliches and conventions for one reason or another. It guides the audience to make sense of what they see or hear. Throughout history, narratives frequently challenge these conventions to force the audience to reassess how we see and experience art and, to an extent, re-examine how we perceive the world we live in. It is a common observation among scholars that no film, or any piece of art for that matter, is created out of context, either socially, politically, or culturally. As Greta Olson and Sarah Copeland have summarized in their essay Towards the Politics of Form, these contexts serve as a textual rendering of a given historical moment, and shape the way we, the audience, perceive narrational forms and devices. looking at the broad themes of Hollywood throughout the ages, we can observe a multitude of prominent styles of narrative forms reflecting the current state of their respective cultural, societal, and political frameworks. In other words, genre doesn't only define the filmic form we as filmmakers and storytellers need to understand, but also represents the cultural climate and society we live in. Looking at some of the movies that were popular back in the 1980s, we see Sylvester Stallone as Rambo, Arnold Schwarzenegger in James Cameron's Terminator, or Bruce Willis as John McClane in John McTiernan's Die Hard. These were all filmic embodiments of the time they were made in. It was a time when the war on drugs and the Cold War against Russia were at their height, when the United States utilized Hollywood to portray itself as the one global superpower, when the respective heroes' bodies are represented as hypermasculine muscle machines. Going into the 90s, however, we have an almost direct opposite view on the spectrum. Suddenly we see a rise in much more introspective cinema. The films were a reaction against the glossy, special effects-laden, high-concept movies of the 80s. They were the antithesis to Top Gun and Apocalypse Now. It was the first decade to have movies made by directors raised on music videos and pop culture as we know it. It established a mainstream success of low to mid-budget cinema. Family-friendly pictures and feel-good romances netted big audiences, while independent films captured hearts, engaged minds, and invaded Hollywood. By the decade's end, every studio boasted its own art film affiliate. In making a movie, we as filmmakers deliberately make countless decisions regarding the narrational and stylistic elements we want to include or implement in our films. However, the process of making these decisions starts long before picking up the camera for the first scene to be shot, and even longer before the material enters the editing room. At the same time, it doesn't end until the final version is released to the public. In some cases, like the re-released versions of George Lucas' Star Wars or Peter Jackson's trilogy of The Lord of the Rings, changes to the material are made even after being released to the public by releasing newer versions with updated visual effects or previously unseen material. Although it is debatable whether the release of these alternative versions was made for artistic reasons or merely a way to increase monetary profits. Filmmaking is a continuous and dynamic process where choices are made and remade over and over again. These choices, however, are not only made for artistic reasons. Filmic forms and their conventions have developed over the past 2 centuries and continue to do so. They convey meanings and shape the viewer's activity in making sense of what they see. For someone who is passionate about cinema, they may find themselves deeply immersed in the complicated, beautiful, or frightening worlds of filmic arts. This implication that cinema and its inception directly influence human life encapsulates the philosophy that films are not just the source of entertainment, but have the ability to substantially impact society. In this sense, the viewer's perception, emotion, and cognition are essential to films and formal elements, and vice versa. It remains to be said that this definition of genre isn't necessarily the ultimate hard truth you need to memorize. It is merely a perspective on the topic at hand, and we all need to take multiple perspectives into account to truly understand these concepts. So let me know what you think about this approach and in the comments, and I will see you next time.